big idea of what I thought was going to be today. And I'm trying to get to a view where I'm not just looking at myself, because that's a bummer. Okay. And then I Zoomed with the two people I'm interviewing today, and all of a sudden the whole thing, hasn't changed, but I'm rethinking what I thought it was going to be. So this is on the intersectionality. Welcome everybody, and I'm glad you're all here. This is going to be on the intersectionality of the experiences of trauma, loss, and disability. But one of the things that I want to take some time in the intro here to say overtly is that, we created our mission statement, and over the years, we say we help transform trauma, loss, disability, and we kind of throw them all together like it's one big long word, right? And on one level, it is one big long word because they share similarities, but they're also distinct experiences. So, and one of the things that I hope you've all learned from us in a little bit is that that when you can differentiate different parts of your body, your sitting bones from the lift in your chest, the bottoms of your feet from the top of your head, your front body from the back body, that when a differentiation occurs, there's an opportunity to realize the whole in a different way. So you don't differentiate to get lost in the parts, you differentiate to absorb the whole, right? And so in thinking of these 4 sessions that are coming this year, this being the first one, they are kind of, in my mind, loosely intended to build off of each other, right? So I thought it was important for us to distinguish the experiences, kind of explore the similarities and differences, and then build. Like one of the ones will be on invisible disabilities more, and one, they're going to build in different ways. And then, so I had this great big highfalutin plan inside my head. And then I interviewed the people yesterday. I talked to the people yesterday, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, it's not going to be as a discussion this way. One of the most powerful things about Mind Body Solutions and this community is the fact that it's personal, that everyone's got a different story and a different take on, and a different experience with trauma, loss, and disability. And that's what's so powerful to me. I think if I were and am a student in this group, I get so much from hearing what everyone else's experiences is. Yesterday, I can tell you that I learned some things about MS that I never knew. I learned some things about cerebral palsy I never knew. I learned about a whole bunch of things about the relationship to it, how much with disability, and this is something, a frame I want to have everyone have now for this discussion for the whole year, is that regardless of the situation you're living in, your version of this experience, let's just take an overt disability like mine, that's more visual too. Even though parts of my experience are visible to the outside world, quite frankly, the totality of my experience with trauma, loss, and disability, even though I get on a wheelchair so people know I'm disabled, a lot of my iceberg remains under the water, right? So that's everyone's story on this call. That's everyone's story that are walking around in the world, that much of their story is it's an iceberg and it is underwater. And there's what's under the water and over the water, right? And one of the complexities of navigating trauma, loss, and disability is to reconcile that no matter what, there's the underside of the iceberg that even your family and closest friends are never fully going to know. There's the top side that they think they know, right? And I hope one of the goals of our community as it comes together, coheres, and hopefully continues to expand is that on a level that's unexpected, we can be company with each other, with the part of the iceberg that's under the water too, right? At least knowing that people are swimming with you. Different icebergs are floating around that have their underside of the iceberg, right? And that at least, even if we can't exactly see, we know from our own experience what's underneath. And today, you're going to get two different stories of the visual and the not so visual in conjunction with each other. You're going to get in one story someone that came into a quote disability further into their life, and then the second story is going to be more someone that was born with the disability, and you're going to see the contrast between how, and for different, almost opposite reasons, the underside of the iceberg was missed with consequences, right? And in both cases, an extraordinary level of resilience comes out in both stories, right? And that's part of what I want to also get across with the yoga practice part of this, is that the hope of how yoga can help trauma, loss, and disability, even though they're all distinct, is that it works and tries to empower, or I hate the word empower, right? But whatever the word would be, it supports, it expands, it grounds the part of human consciousness that manifests as resilience in the world, right? So blah blah blah, I better stop talking, because I can already tell you, for those of you that have been with me for a long time, Matrix is one of my favorite movies, right? And one of my favorite lines is when Morpheus says, "Time is always against us." Anyone that, so we're already behind already. I haven't even started and I'm behind, right? And anyone that comes in my class knows that I have a tendency to be verbose, like what's happening right now. Okay, so, but here's a non sequitur I want to throw in right at the end. So right before I came online, I rediscovered, this is in my top 5 all-time favorite songs. And because I saw an advertisement for the documentary that I haven't seen yet, Bob Marley, the documentary on, I don't know if it's a documentary or a movie, whatever, and I hope it's good, and I'm going to go anyway, even if it's bad. But one of my favorite songs of all time is Redemption Songs, right? And if you don't know that song, for God's sakes, know that song, right? But it's one of the energies of know what's going on in my head the whole time we're talking right now, right? And if you don't know enough about Bob Marley, besides the fact he smoked a lot of pot, don't hold that against him, right? He had some shit going on, right? All right. He wanted everyone to love each other. He actually thought the world could actually heal through love and rhythm, right? So what the hell? All right. So here we go. We're gonna start the interview. I'm gonna call on, which, by the way, apparently she didn't change her name. I don't think she changed her name, but Melinda Rivers. Like, I love Rivers. I freaking love Rivers. So the fact that it could be her last name, I'm kind of jealous, right? And then she's got Melinda Rivers Yoga, right? Because she's a yoga teacher too. But I got to give you some background on Melinda. She's going to come up and get interviewed with me. Um, um, so just so you know, and we're going to try not to hold this against her, and this is me being facetious, I sometimes have to clarify. She's born in freaking Canada. Okay. She's not even a US citizen. I mean, she is, but she's kind of both. She's got, and on some level in the wreckage that is our political system, I'm a little bit envious that I can't just easily go to Canada at certain points. So I'm actually kind of envious. So and here's a couple other things back in her background. She moved from Canada. She grew up in Oklahoma, went to high school in Houston, Texas. She went to a small liberal arts school in Western Massachusetts. And I love this. You see, I'm going to have a whole bunch of conversations about this. Her major, this is even worse than philosophy. See, I love this about her. Theory of religions, not even theology. Like, what the hell? Okay, I love that, right? But then here's the big switch. She decided not to go to graduate school, and one of her first jobs was at a subsidiary of Estee Lauder called Origins. Now, here's a claim to fame. Last week, we do this thing called Team Adaptables, for those of you that don't know. And we do this thing, we start out with 2 truths and a lie, and Melinda signed up for it. And it turns out that one of her truths, and if you want to watch 2 truths and a lie, you should go back and watch the video of this. One of her truths is that she said that we're trying to see if it was a truth or a lie. She said that a shade of foundation makeup, a shade of it, was made based on her skin hue. Shade, not hue's the wrong word, right? And so I don't know if I've ever met and will ever meet again that can claim that a foundation shade was made based on her mug, right? So another weird claim to fame. So with no further ado, I don't think I missed anything that I really need to say. Oh, the other thing that I think is fascinating too, that you know as a background, she started her own yoga practice in 1990. So she's a longtime practitioner that then, like a lot of us on the call, had things change when the universe changed for her, like it did for a lot of us when you acquire a condition or whatever. So I'd like to introduce Melinda Rivers, whose name I'm jealous of. Thanks for coming, Melinda.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah. Did I miss any fun facts? These are the facts that I think I got the fun biographical facts.
You left
They're
out the
up above.
hardware store.
Oh, yes. Oh, you gotta know this. Oh, damn it. Thank you for this. Right. So she moves to Maine in like 2013, and she decides there's a local hardware store that's going out of business. And she decides to buy the hardware store, go from origins and makeup and image driven awareness to running a hardware store and saving it until someone else could take it over and buy it. But the line that I loved that she said yesterday, Melinda, was, what was the healing story? You will own the store for as long as, say that line.
You say I would keep the store as long as I was selling more nails that put the cabinets together than matched the paint on the cabinets.
So check that out. So like she told me one of the reasons why she loved where she lives in rural Maine is because it's pragmatic and straightforward living, right? And when you think about if someone's just coming in to beautify their house rather than build their house, right? As long as they're coming in to build the cabinet and not match the color paint, She's where she wants to be, right? So like as you know, I love one-line stories. That's a one-line story and tells you something about Melinda. All right, so fast forwarding to to where Melinda, like you were going about your life, living in New York City, talk a little bit, the fast-paced stuff, right? So then you decided to get out of it and transition to, did you just know the fast pace was too much?
Yeah, it wasn't even the pace, it was the well, it was the window dressing, it was the emptiness of it, I think. Um, where you're giving out a lot of energy and the whole place, the city, and this is in the 2000s, and everything's really active, but you're not getting a lot back.
Wow. All right. That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. And actually, that's kind of a story for of it. And then you're there and you move to Maine, and then you come up in 2020, you're diagnosed with the condition that brings you to ultimately to Mind Body Solutions. So talk a little bit about what happened there.
Well, yeah, so in February 2020, I'm at the hardware store, and I don't know if everyone remembers what the world was like in February of 2020, but it was just as in just before everything changed. Um, but I noticed that I had a gray blur in my left eye. And I have a history of chronic migraines, so naturally I thought I was about to have a big migraine. Um, and then it turned out not to be a migraine. And then I started down the path of, well, now we need to get an MRI, and then a referral to an ophthalmologist, and start the whole process of getting diagnosed with ultimately multiple sclerosis.
And they it because there was all the delays in there, it didn't happen right away, right? There's a time lag.
It was a big time lag. Part of it's that I live in rural coastal Maine, and even before the pandemic, there's not a lot of resources. Um, so it took about 3 weeks for me to get the diagnosis and the treatment for optic neuritis, which is IV steroids. But then what happened was the state of Maine shut down the entire medical system except for emergencies. And an MS diagnosis isn't an emergency in that situation. So it wasn't until August that I was able to get into my GP, who could then refer me to a neurologist, who could then get another set of MRIs done and confirm the diagnosis.
Yeah, so right now, I want to talk a little bit, go in depth a little bit more about how MS as is presenting in your case, has presented in your case. So it starts with losing, having some blindness in one eye, which is now how much sight have you lost in your left eye?
95%.
How much?
95.
95. So left
Mhm.
side, you're not having the same visual field. And so what would you say are the main symptoms of the fact that you have MS? Because you're pretty ambulatory, right? I mean, what I can tell, we can talk a little bit about the physical stuff, but tell me about how you experience the presentation of MS.
Yeah, so at first it was the visual was the most obvious, but mostly it was fatigue. Like I just shut down. Um, so I went from being, you know, active, involved person to I would say I was present and accounted for maybe an hour a day after that first attack, or you know, the attack that led to my diagnosis. And so that was the biggest part of it, and I just had to find a way to handle that at home for, you know, it was 6 months before I had the
Six
official
months.
diagnosis. Yeah.
So this
Before I had the
episode,
diagnosis and could talk to a doctor about it.
yeah. And so really fatigued all the time. In our discussion yesterday, you talked about it being, and this is hard to describe, you described it as an existential fatigue. So try to give a little bit of description of how that might be different than being just exhausted.
Yeah, it's not being tired. And I think people do experience muscle fatigue. They talk about like you try to walk and it feels like walking, through sand or but it's more than that. It was I mean, if I only had an hour a day where I was awake and aware, the rest of it was lost. I was lost. I was so fatigued. It's kind of like when you watch a candle flame guttering out. And it's right at that point where is the flame gonna come back or is it done? And you just have to wait.
And so it's not just that you're not in contact, you're like wondering how you could go forward. And when I hear existential, it's like it's not just you're gonna die, it's like you can't even imagine how life functions, right?
Yeah.
So you're knocked underneath of it. And what I think is so interesting, well, interesting and hard in listening to you was that, I mean, it doesn't even make sense to say you were mentally fatigued and physically fatigued. I mean, when I hear you go to a third word, right? Right. I mean, like it's not just, oh, I'm tired and I can't think. It's like, so it's not just that you can't be present for more than an hour or track what's going on. Can't imagine your bones rolling over either. You know what I mean? Like they're like it's a different layer of, and did sleep help? I'm guessing not. Did you know you were asleep, fatigued while you're sleeping?
Yeah, sleep, no, I didn't. Um, and sleep having healthy, good sleep is an important part of coming back from fatigue, but, d you know, doesn't impact it in that way. Like, I would go to bed and wake up in the morning, but
Yeah, what's
not all
funny,
of me.
and this is part of, I think, was something that we can all share on the call, is that you know how when whatever condition or situation we're living in, and like for me, it's when I get really systemically sick. Let's say with a really bad bladder infection or something, and someone says, "Oh, you just need to rest to get better," kind of like what they'd say when you have a cold,
Yeah.
right? Or an illness, like, "Oh, just rest and you'll get better." And there's a truth to that, except that doesn't help at all, right? When you're in it, like, so like, oh no, you just get in bed and lie down and take a nap. It's like, yeah, and I'm gonna wake up and it's gonna be the same because it's not gonna touch the universe in which it's occurring, right? And that's when you really, that's why I think the word existential is important, because that's when you really know your whole manifestation is under fire, right? I've had that a few times, and so it's intense. All right, so fatigue, in terms of more physical things, right? Like, what are some of the other things? Although you can get up and move around, there are some things that are changing, right? And have changed. What are those?
Well, the big one that I noticed is, well, for one, losing my eyesight meant I also lost my depth perception. And then some of the damage related to that, I actually lost quite a bit of proprioception, um, and therefore balance, because they're all tied together. So while I am ambulatory, it requires a lot of effort to be aware of where I am in space and to not list over, to remain in balance. So that takes a certain amount of energy expenditure.
And that's another
Um,
thing a lot of us can relate to, because the what people don't see, and this is part of the underside of the iceberg, right, is that the amount of energy it takes just to manage the things that people think are ordinary to get to is an extraordinary amount of energy, right? So whether that's movement, whether that's, it's like that's part of the underside of the iceberg. It's like, no, actually just do it and showing up. That's why I always want in my body sessions for teachers to invest in the resilience of our students, because if they're showing up, and they have clothes on and they're in pretty good shape, they actually have already like come across the Grand Canyon to come to the class. And that's something we like to try to think. The other thing I know that we had talked a little bit about is you had kind of the, you told me yesterday about the processing things at speed is really difficult, including something like reading. So talk a
Mm,
little bit about that.
absolutely. Because I have several dozen lesions throughout my white matter, and so that absolutely impacts processing speed. And one of the first things I noticed was, okay, well, let me try to read. I like reading. I have my whole life, and I couldn't do it. Because I now appreciate how much is involved in being able to read. Because you not only have all of the front to back left brain activity involved in recognizing letters and understanding what they mean and putting them together in words and sentences. And what I found really surprising as I continued to try to practice it is eventually not like factual texts were easier, but nonfiction, I still can't do it. Or I mean, fiction.
Non-fiction. Yeah, this is one of the
Fiction,
fascinating
I
things
still
I heard
can't do it.
yesterday. That fiction takes a level of imagination on top of like processing the facts that takes more energy out of the brain. I find this fascinating.
And even biography, because you have to not only know what the words mean, but then you have to understand why the person is saying it. There's a level of empathy there and an extra level of understanding that requires an extra layer of processing. And it's not only exhausting, it's painful. It'll give me a headache just trying to get all that together.
Yeah, I just think that's one of those things out of the conversation. I'm still like amazed and think it's wonderful. And I also find reading poetry sometimes exhausting. Like I can't read it very long or very deeply. You know, I can't read like 50 pages of poetry. If I'm really being honest, I can read two poems and live with them for a while, right? Because it's like there's so much more involved. I remember one time I heard Gita Iyengar say in a class I was in with her, she said, well, don't you know that talking so much, it's not just reading, talking so much takes energy from your legs, right? And it's like it's fatiguing on levels we don't even realize. So when you have someone has a traumatic brain injury, speaking itself is a and not only, and I never thought of it as reading too, is a gigantic energy drain, right? Thinking hard takes energy. Your brain sucks up a lot of water and a lot of air and a lot of nutrients and needs sugar and all this stuff, right? So
Oh, yeah.
all these things are interesting. I think that's a really interesting fact. So you, and it's like you use some walking sticks and stuff because let's talk a little bit about that. So when you're walking, and then we're going to lead right into what you said about what the doctor said, what some of the neurologists say about walking sticks, because that's going to lead us right into a conception of your, the underground part of the under part of
Hmm.
the iceberg, right? So you like walking sticks. Why? It's not like you're falling
Well,
over, but
so um, certainly part of MS is there's some mobility issues, but so I wanted to make sure I was walking, making sure I was practicing walking. But I immediately gravitated to the walking sticks because part of my issue was my awareness in space. And to be able to, it took away a lot of the extra energy involved in remembering how to walk or thinking about how to walk. Because if you think of all the micro movements involved in walking, including staying upright, I'm like, man, I'm in the sticks. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to do anything else today. You know.
yeah. See, I love this. And one of the things for everyone on the call, if you think about one of our principles, what Melinda's describing is exactly one of the things we try to pass on is that mind enters the body through reference, right? And so the sticks are a form of reference, but for the spine, not just for the mind. So if the spine's got a couple of things in front of it. It's like having a extra wheel on something that might tip over, right? If the spine's got something that gives it input to keep it upright, that you don't have to be aware of, then the reference stays up and down in the spine and the energy is conserved, both mentally and physically. So it's an example of mind enters the body through reference, and the fact that the spine needs to be supported, and the midline needs to be supported, not just as an idea, but as a tangible sensation, right? And that's one of the hopefully you're getting that out of all of our classes, right? Is that the spine is seeking expression.
Well, and that because you've been talking about lately about the start of a pose, and that when you brought up reference yesterday, that was immediately what popped up in my mind because I thought about when I use the sticks, the first thing I do is this, and then I can
Elongation
go
in the
right from
spine, which distributes energy through the whole body, which helps proprioception. It doesn't have to be mental, blah, 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 blah. All these things get going. And it's so simple, right? All right.
yeah.
So we need to keep moving on. But when you went to a couple of neurologists and they watch how well you walk, right? Now that they go to you, well, what did they say?
So you don't really need the sticks. You just like using them.
Right? And again, here's where the universe also goes. They have no idea the underlying dynamic of human motion and energy and deeper stuff. So they immediately go, well, it's just psychological. Well, no, there's a whole story that those doctors are not fully being aware of, that they don't know because they don't know it in their own experience. So they only know it from a book, right? So let's talk a little bit about your take on the way the medical model perceives and reacts to MS as it manifests. Is it that scale we were talking about yesterday?
Yeah. So I find it interesting. So for those who don't know or a refresher, multiple sclerosis is a disease of the central nervous system where your immune system crosses the blood-brain barrier and attacks the myelin in your nervous system, short version. Um, but how once you're diagnosed, how the medical model follows the course or the progression of the disease is something called the expanded disability status system scale. And 1 to 4.5, you have some issues, some symptomatic issues because of the disease, but disability really kicks in at 5, which is when you start needing mobility aids. So the the treatment of the disease is the hope of preventing you from getting to 5. And then from 5 to 9.5 is you move on to rollators and wheelchairs and power wheelchairs and then assistance eating and breathing, and then you're done. What really struck me is that from 1 to 4.5 is like everything else. It's cognitive issues, it's difficulty speaking, it's motor sensory problems, it's spasticity, bladder and bowel issues, sexual dysfunction, pain. For example, I have trigeminal neuralgia, so neuropathic pain in my face. A lot of people have the MS hug where your intercostal muscles freak out like your ribs are going to break. That's in 1 to 4.5. So I'm sitting there with neurologists who look at me and say, "You don't present like you have MS." And like, you're not even really paying attention to my experience.
Yeah. So we don't really get as much involved until it's visually and behaviorally, physically apparent, right? Which sounds like, right, the myths of the underside of the iceberg, right? All right. So this all kind of led you to pick up yoga again, right? So you or not again, but really dive into it. So right now you have um Melinda River yoga, but you also have just gone through a couple different yoga trains simultaneously. It's an interesting confounding choice, right? To do it both at once, but that's how the word happens. What trainings have you been in and just finished both of them?
So I did my basic 200-hour last year, but I just did Mindy Eisenberg's Yoga Moves Anybody through her Yoga Moves MS program, her 40-hour training on that, and Jivana Heyman's accessible yoga training, 40-hour training.
Yeah, and so and then you do that too, but then you come to Mind Body Solutions, and you what seems different? What
So there's out in the world there is adaptive yoga, um, and and there's accessible yoga, and that's kind of what I was trying to wrap my head around. Um, where there's sort of modern contemporary asana and you adapt those poses to fit different bodies. And then there's accessible yoga, which seems to be trying to open a door for anybody to have access to the asana, but it's still based in this big external idea or picture of the pose. And doesn't necessarily have any access to the internal experience of the pose. And that's what really opened my eyes in mind body solutions. Was my first person experience of the pose, not what it looks like.
right? And it kind of feels like coming home, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that sensation of relief that is part of, it's not just belonging and feeling welcome. It's like, no, this is, I remember going, oh, this, when I first started trying to do Dandasana on the mat in the very beginning of my yoga practice, I was like, wait, this just makes sense that if I roll my own femur bones in and my inner groin drops a little bit, that my spine wants to go back in opposition and go up. That's cool, right? And it's like, but it was like, it wasn't like a revelation. It's like, this is what makes sense. Is that my body just is wanting to give me the input, but doesn't have the mechanism to do it, right? So what in kind of in wrap up, because now I know you're wanting to, so yeah, you just what you're gonna go out and teach people. I can already, you're on the road to doing whatever. And any way that we can be helpful in that path is great. Um, but I want you to reflect back in closing here about um the relationship between the under the invisible disability, the loss, and the trauma of having all this occur. Like, are you able to see them as different? Do they all kind of merge together? Because that's the thing that's so that we're all on this call trying to pull apart a thread that looks like it's the same, and it is the same on one level. And so, has this been a traumatizing experience going through this?
MS?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I say the obvious question, like, yeah,
Well, I think
right.
about it's interesting. I had to because I love words. I had to look it up, and there is a certain distinction between what was it? That trauma is a wound, and loss is like a severing. So you're living with the present absence. Um, and disability is living with that in the present in a way.
Living what?
Living with all of that in the present moment
Yeah.
is
Mm,
continuing to live with all of that. And I think
dang.
that's kind of where I am, especially because one thing we didn't mention real quick is that with MS, muscle learning doesn't carry over.
Oh yeah, damn it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I will mention that real quick. So part of the bottom side of the iceberg and building that awareness and learning to practice the sensations of the pose become even more important than practicing the physical pose. Because the example I can give is that if you want to be able to continue to walk and walk better, you need to practice walking. And if you think maybe I'll give myself an extra challenge and like walk in water, like walk in a swimming pool, all your brain will learn to do is walk in water. You have to walk on the earth. You have to be where you have to practice being where you actually want to be. Because the damage is in the brain, it's not in the muscles. So if you practice the muscles, your brain's not going to learn anything.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like that what I love, and I'm so glad you brought this up. You can see why what time's always against us, because this is a whole other no, it's awesome, but it's really important, in fact. Um um is that what's one of the things you discovered at MBS is that a different way of feeling the pose carries forward in a way that the physical muscle actions don't carry forward to other poses. For example, to me was like the arms wide in Virabhadra in Warrior 2. That just shows you how to do this. It doesn't show you how to have your arms in different movements in the same way. That's part of that was one of the things I learned big time, is that and so part of the hope of what we're doing, and maybe it can help MS, and this is like there are a whole bunch of people in our group now that has MS. I mean, this is all, you should all be sharing this back and forth, because I'm learning stuff as of yesterday, is that if we could get, and I've always said this, well, remember, your bones don't have MS, right? You know, like there's parts of you that don't have MS. It's true with CP too. And it's like, if we can get to the levels of that aren't just so based on muscular action, that maybe that does affect the nervous system in a way that transcends some of these conditions. I mean, somehow this level of awareness transcends a severed spinal cord, right? Because that's how I can feel stuff in my legs. And there's some sort of analogy going on here that, don't forget, we're all on the frontier together trying to figure out this stuff, right? And that's what's so fertile about the group coming together. All right, so thanks so much. I'm so glad for that last point. I can't believe I missed it, but all right. So we do have to keep moving, for God's sakes. But I do kind of want, so what's going to happen, I can tell, because time's always against us, is that I want you to take some time right now to reflect a little bit. And if you have any comments or questions right away, write them in the chat right now, or is it, I don't know if any questions or comments have come in, Bethany, but
No questions so far.
so does anybody have any comments or questions? So what's going to happen is I'm going to lead a practice at the end, but it's going to be for those you have to drop off, go ahead and drop off. Don't worry, it's recorded, right? So anyone have any comments or reactions to what they heard right now? I know it's hard to somehow be asked that on a dime, but I know that was cool, but it's probably as clear as mud.
You're welcome to drop things in the chat or raise your hand via Zoom, via the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen, and I can bring you on.
Nothing?
We have people saying thank you for sharing.
Of course, blah, 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 blah. Throw up. Yes, we're all grateful for it, because that's not easy. What Melinda just did is not easy to do. And what she studied in her experience is not easy to do. And yes, thank yous are good. We are all
A couple
really
of comments are, it's a profound statement about disability, and disability is living in the present is a profound statement. And then I'm seeing a couple of people saying having
so whoever said that, it's profound. Disabilities living in the present. Say more about why that's profound for you, if you're willing.
Lisa, are you willing to come on? Are you willing to come on, unmute? Come on, Mike?
Otherwise, someone has to take on why it's profound for you, because I know that Lisa's not the only one that thought that was profound.
Are you talking to me, Bethany?
Oh, are you,
Lisa
can you hear me?
Lisa Chitsey. Yes.
Ah.
Sorry. Had a
Does
couple
anyone
of
else
Lisas
think-
today.
If she's not willing to speak, is any or not able to speak?
I think
anyone
she
else-
hopped on. Lisa, are you're there? Yeah. I'll bring the spotlight up.
Oh, hi guys. I don't know where my video is.
Oh yeah,
All
I
right.
can't spotlight you without the video, but that's fine.
I'm
Go
trying
ahead.
to find my video. Here's my video. Hi, everyone. I knew this is why I didn't want to comment, because I knew Matthew was going to ask me to explain this, and it's not very easy to explain. I just found it very insightful to think about it being separate from the trauma, which is the disability that happened in the past, or the loss. Because I think sometimes I think about them all being one together as one, I guess. I'm not doing this very well. Does that make
I
sense?
completely agree. So like that's part of what this is trying to get at, and it's not easy to get at. This whole topic is really hard because it is important to make the separation, and they all just are one, and they're paradoxically intersected like that. Right. I'm sorry if you didn't want to comment on this. I feel like I think it's so fascinating because it's exactly what we need to try to articulate. And so does separating them create a sensation of some sort of freedom? Like what's the sensation? That's what I'm trying to get at. And it doesn't have to just Lisa that tries to say this, but what's the sensation that occurs when you go, oh my God, they are kind of different?
Well, I link it back to Matthew, to what you said about, like I have a student with CP, like you don't have CP in every piece of your body, or you don't have MS in every piece of your body. And how are we as teachers separating those pieces for our students so they can create more sensations and have that yoga be more accessible on that level that we're talking about here?
Yeah, no, and it's a good challenge. Does anyone else have any comments about that? Because I also found that the idea that you can think about disability, because everyone, right? Part of the idea of this topic is that everyone lives with trauma, loss, and disability. It's whether everybody, no matter who's walking around the planet. But the idea, I kind of like the idea of disability being the living, breathing manifestation in the present of what it is to like be a human being, right? Because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty clear I'm not perfect, right? I'm pretty clear about that, and that I'm a work in progress. So I really like that. Anyone else have any?
Mary Peterson has her
reaction?
Mary has her hand up.
Mary.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Melinda. I had a question for you. And that is, I really am struck by you talking about muscle memory and the sensation. So has it, just with that, you articulating that, have you been able to like have more sensations, like sensations that you haven't ever noticed before?
Yes.
Had it expanded your sense of sensations?
Absolutely.
And can you talk about that? I mean, how has that happened, or what has that experience been like?
One of probably the biggest one, to start at the end, is by focusing on the sensation, the feeling of doing asana internally. Awareness of different sensations, but I think most of all, the ultimate sensation that of being more than the sum of my parts. So not only do I have a different sense of my feet, like through the neuropathy and numbness and tingling, and grounding allows for a different appreciation of total sensation from head to toe, of being complete. I think that's probably the ultimate sensation that I end up feeling by practicing this way.
Well, and I think that also then it allows you to be even more fully in the present.
Even when things are disconnected.
Right.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I think that yoga, and we need to move on to the next one here soon, is that one of the things that I think that yoga does is supports, not as a belief or an idea, I want to say literal sensation of what wholeness feels from inside to out. I didn't realize that space, well, I did kind of realize this, but it's coming to a new space is part of the sensation of living, right? That it not just action is. So I used to teach this, I'd say things like to practitioners, space is part of your base in a pose. So if you can spread out your awareness near the earth, you're going to receive more awareness, right? And so like, but like there's living in and through the absence. It's not just loss, right? And that's part of the way that I think trauma is a teacher, that it shows you that loss has much more energetic potential, not just by overcoming it, but by realizing it's a lens. It's a changed lens on living. And I think that that's part of why hopefully we'll all get wiser as we age. You get a different lens, right, on what's happening. But I digress. But it's a good segue, and let's go bring on Paige here. It's
Thanks,
a really
Brenda.
good segue. And by the way, a lot of this yoga practice is probably going to happen after hours. So just know that, and know that it's on recording if you only have limited time today. All right. So Paige, come on down. You're on the Price is Right.
Hello.
Hey, Paige, where are you calling from?
I'm in the UK right now.
Where in the UK?
Leicester.
Leicester? Where the hell's Leicester?
The Midlands.
The Midlands? Where are the Midlands?
The middle of the UK.
The middle of the UK? Gotcha. All right. All right. So I want to just give a little bit of biographical stuff about Paige. She's relatively new as a student to our MBS classes, which is awesome. She reached out to me and to Mind Body Students like a year ago. Of course, what a surprise. I was tardy in replying. She wanted to talk about all things adaptive yoga because she's, and we'll get into this as this conversation goes on, working for a foundation that's trying to do adaptive yoga in the UK, and she's the point person on that whole thing, but we'll get into that in a second. She has a twin sister. I like knowing twins, so I think that's just a cool fact, right? And then she's an adaptive yoga teacher, and I just found this out yesterday, so I'm still processing this new biographical fact about her. Has been an international competitor in wheelchair sports. Her main, it was swimming, but mainly sprints in wheelchairs. So that's a whole piece that I didn't realize, but it makes sense as to where she works and what she's doing. So, which is at the Matt Hampson Foundation. And so tell us a little bit, Paige, about your role there and what you're trying to facilitate. Because I didn't they at first be one of the people that sponsored your wheelchair athleticism? So talk a little bit about that and your role now.
Yeah. So the Matt Hampson Foundation has the Get Busy Living Centre in Melton Mowbray, which is Leicestershire in the UK. And we support those that are seriously injured through sport. So the ethos is to get busy living after a catastrophic injury. And being a local charity and having connections with Matt himself as a community sports champion, I was
Because he was
introduced
a
to.
rugby player that got injured, right?
Yes, so he was playing rugby for England under 21s, and the rugby scrum collapsed on him, and he became paralysed from the neck down. And he set up the foundation to support those in a similar position to himself,
Mhm.
promoting that there is life after catastrophic injury.
Yeah. So, and then your role there. So you're a sponsored athlete, and then you find yoga, we'll get to that. But then your role there now is what?
Yeah, so I was supported by them as a local athlete, and fast forward 5 years or so, I had the opportunity to work for the foundation. Started out as a community fundraiser, and then during lockdown, I qualified as a yoga teacher. And then when I went back to work, it was sort of introduced to me that we're going to try and do some yoga and introduce some yoga at the foundation. And that's where it's kind of all been created, and it's really exciting. So now I teach one-to-one yoga to our beneficiaries, as well as offering group-based yoga sessions and workshops at the foundation.
So and your background in yoga is Ashtanga yoga, right?
Yes.
So you like the physical challenges of it?
Yeah, I do. I do like that. But I found the mat as a result of trying to come away from competitive sport. I needed something new. So I myself, competitive sport caused me to sustain injuries to my shoulders, and
Her
I
muscle mass got so big in her shoulders that it impinged on nerves. So let's just process again. And she started to come to my class, got to get 4 or 5 in a row because she got up at 5 in the morning from New Zealand because she was visiting family and would join our class on Mondays at 5 in the morning. So again, just a little snapshot of like who this person is, right? But one of the things, and we'll get back to this, we'll circle back to this, but one of the things that you get from yoga is a sense of, and this ties into what Melinda ended with, a sense of self and connection and calm and ease. So although the practice is pretty physical in Ashtanga yoga, right? That's what really hooks your deep part of you, is not necessarily the physical effort, right?
yeah. The yoga mat taught me that there's more to life than just being aided by various different pieces of equipment. And probably for the first time in my life, or more so, I was reminded, you kind of go full circle, because as a child there's like this level of innocence that you are just who you are, and you just accept that and just go about your day and continue to smile, whatever challenges you might be faced with. And then obviously things change, because you're seen as different, and difference isn't always celebrated, unfortunately.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. So the other thing is, I don't know, this might be revealed, I might get in trouble, but she is writing a book about all this. We'll see if it ever writing a book and having to go out the word, but just know that she's a writer too, and so that's also occurring. So I want to back up now and talk a little bit about, you live with a condition, it's CP, cerebral palsy, you're diagnosed at 2.5, right? Talk a little bit about the what you and your family as a kid were presented with when you got the diagnosis of
Yeah.
CP.
So just to give some context rather, I am a twin, and my mum noticed that my development wasn't the same, and so she began to ask questions. And to begin with, I was being given treatment for a tight Achilles tendon, and I wasn't really being told anything else. And then my mum sort of asked the question, we were surrounded by other children, or I was surrounded by other children that had cerebral palsy in these physio sessions, and I was the only one that hadn't got a diagnosis. And my mum actually asked the doctors, has Paige got cerebral palsy? And they responded, yes, Paige has got cerebral palsy. And then the conversation just stopped. But within that diagnosis, my family were told that of all the things that I wouldn't be able to achieve, and that's something I refer to as a life sentence, really.
So kind of told all the things that this is what she's not going to be able to do. Like, so the fundamental orientation was all the loss that you were going to have because you had CP, right? And that, which is not uncommon, and it's not meant maliciously. It's just the worldview of all the things you weren't going to get, right? So one of the things I want to leap forward a little bit, but is that in getting that diagnosis, it's not like you decided to prove everyone wrong, right? Like, but the story, like everyone's story and everyone's experience with disability in different conditions, right? No one's story follows exactly the same path, right? So one of the effects that, okay, so let's quickly have a frame here, quickly talk about the part of the CP that's under the water and the part that's above the water, right? So you said this amazing thing to me yesterday that I'm still like thinking about, which is that it wasn't till like maybe about what we would call middle school, I think you called secondary school, like about 11, that you started to realize that having CP actually meant something in relationship to a larger group of people, where up until that point, your life was sheltered enough where it's just kind of like, it's what you knew, right? So talk a little bit about that transition into the greater stream of culture that maybe happens.
Yeah, to be honest, it was brutal in places, and it was really ugly, because I didn't really see it until other people started to point it out. I knew that I had cerebral palsy. I knew I was living with cerebral palsy, and that obviously came with physical challenges as well as cognitive challenges and lots of milestone delays and things like that. But the trouble is, we live in a society that is built on ideals and milestones. So if you're that person that doesn't quite fit in, then it takes a lot of effort to try and, I guess, prove yourself in the world and find your place in the world.
Yeah, and I think again, a lot of the people on the call, whether you're born with something, and what's more hard about the story from childhood innocence is your innocence then gets transformed by how the world receives what you are and who you are, right?
Yeah.
And it just makes it more extreme. But even someone that acquires a disability, all of a sudden, all your relationship to outer space, to where people happen, is transformed, right? And so they're, even though they're different, then it's an important difference in figuring out. I wanted to have someone that was born with a disability on this call, and someone that acquired one, because this contrast really matters. So just to kind of quick flash forward, like this kind of that transition into more space that was not necessarily easy, culminated with like an onset of more anxiety, right? Or anxiety about being in, to where it culminated. I think you said you were around 15, where you kind of didn't want to go out by yourself for like a whole year. You kind of secluded yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so at that age, it started to get even worse. You think that's because the world was different, or because you became aware of the world's judgments more? How did the anxiety start to rise?
I mean, unfortunately, I remember being as young as 6 or 7 and being, with family members and being stopped by random strangers just to ask questions, and it became the norm. But then when you become a teenager and you realize that your norm isn't everyone else's norm, in terms of, it would be like me stopping someone that didn't have CP or any condition. That became my norm, that people would just stop me in the street. But then, yeah, when you realize that it's not everyone else's norm, you think, oh, hold about, like, why is this happening to me? And then you see the difference as an ugly rather than a celebration of who you are.
Right. And then it gets on steroids when you enter middle school, because that's what happens in middle school, anyway. You start to become aware that your sneakers aren't the right ones, or, you worry about all your friends' judgments, and, but so you started, it kind of culminated, but I want to back up now quick and pick up another piece, which is going on, which is like, so it became more apparent, the physical part, the part of that's above the water of you're right, that people are seeing that you're not walking the same way or whatever. One of the things that was also going on was the underwater part, that CP has cognitive effects too, that actually, from hearing your story yesterday, that were not really supported and met in the same way they could have. So like, for example, like school and reading, for example. So talk a little bit about this other cognitive stuff that is going on.
So something I didn't mention yesterday, Matthew, was that I did have support of a teaching assistant throughout my whole education. I think what was missing in my education was that I was expected to meet the curriculum and meet the learning styles that were being taught. And when you have cognitive challenges, the learning style and the processing of information that's being given to you is delayed, and it's slow, and it's just really challenging. So Melinda touched upon reading earlier, and this is something I've always found a challenge. So when other children would be sat, in class reading a book or anything like that, I'd just be there with the the book in front of me, and I wouldn't be reading it. I just had to look as if I was doing what everyone else is doing. And ultimately, I didn't meet grades and expectations of reading levels for a long time. And I think that my reading now would still be considered behind for my age and where I'm at in my life. But as you
I
know,
doubt it. I just don't, but whatever. Okay. So we're gonna put a pin in that one, because like whatever, because the way you're able to verbalize and articulate your thought, whatever. But I want to, yes, I believe that. but I also believe that you process information like very few people I've encountered. So I think we're good, right?
Okay.
But one of the things you said to me yesterday that I thought was also somebody just want to get in here is that, like, for example, you're asked to take these tests, you have to take them over and over again. Your friends are passing them, but you don't even understand the questions you're being asked, right? Because you can't read the exams and do it in the time you need to be
Yeah.
done. And so then you're getting your options changed, right? Because of what curriculum you can take and the way this, the things you want to take, and all of a sudden all this starts happening, and you're becoming aware of the social stigma because your awareness is opening up. So one of the things that was struck me yesterday, and I want to get out here, is that then starting about 16, 17, you're not having great success, you're kind of ostracized by perceptions because people mean well, but they ask you what the hell happened to you, what's wrong with you, right? Oh, by the way, before I get into this, I do love the part of the story that's so positive is that when you start to transform your conception of even rehabilitation and living with CP and all the things, you found a device that helps you read, right?
Yeah.
And then made reading way easier, which you've gotten earlier. But I love that you stayed at it because, in fact, you don't have all the cognitive processing issues deep in there that you thought you had, right? And so to me, that's a real success story that you found something that makes you able to read more vibrantly. And to me, that's a metaphor for how you lived, the resilience you've shown, right? So,
Yeah, it's a cool little tool for sure.
yeah. So it's awesome. And I wish you had gotten that earlier. But jumping back out of what to me is like a part of the great transformation here, is that you started to use a wheelchair like 80 to 90% of the time, starting about 16, 17, right? And that was also due to the fatigue of moving around, but also so people wouldn't watch you walk or stare at your legs so much. So talk a little bit about that. So you'd rather them stare at the wheelchair than stare at your legs, right?
I don't know whether you can have a preference to what they stare at.
Yeah, exactly. But
I just knew that I could move fairly fast in a wheelchair, and at least if I needed to move quickly, I could do that. And also I was very heavily involved in sport and community at this point, and a lot of my friends that I'd met, they use wheelchairs and they were getting on fine. So it was like, okay,
exactly.
they're doing all right. Again,
Yeah.
it's that thing of wanting to fit in, isn't it?
Right. So, but that's kind of what I want to get out here is that you have a little bit of trouble in school, the social aspect of not just friendships, but just being in space with people is challenging. But then you start to have real success. Like, what did then athletics and adaptive sports come to mean to you?
It was something I was good at, and I wasn't being corrected in any way. It's just like, oh, Paige, you're doing great. And it's like, wow, this is cool. Yeah, my whole sort of confidence changed, my drive to succeed in something. I was just very driven. I had a lot of enthusiasm and I loved it. It was my outlet. So when I was being sort of I guess bothered by other people, bothered by society for being different, I could go and rock up to my sports club and just be myself and, you know, speed around in my, in my wheelchair and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, but it's also, you said yesterday too, is that although it gave you like, you called it your haven, a place where you could succeed and not have to deal with all the always being corrected, which by the way, ain't that the truth? Everyone's always trying to, oh, you should just do this. Or I mean, everyone on the call, right, lives this all the time. But then you that oh my God, I'm losing my train of thought. But so that ends up being a place of success, but it didn't necessarily make you less anxious too much in other parts of your life that were being a struggle, right?
No, it was just a break away from reality, I guess. But that hard work and driven dedication to sport has got me to where I am.
Yeah, so like that I think is, and then that's part of what eventually kind of in some ways led you to yoga. So you have the shoulder injury, so you work so hard. So
Yeah.
you know, and then you get so strong, you start to have nerve impingement, but you don't just get into competitive sports. You like compete internationally, like in Amsterdam and in Switzerland, and you know, like you're not messing around, right? You're not messing around. And what I like too about your story is that as you're beginning to realize that you need to pursue something else, you end up landing at the foundation that sponsors your athletic career, and you start to know that there's a different path too, right? And now you're bringing it to all those people that are being more athletically oriented, right? Which it is a great compliment, right, between the two. So talk a little bit about what you get out of yoga. I mean, you practice a challenging style of yoga, but that doesn't preclude you from liking what's happening at Mind Body Solutions. But tell me a little bit about what you get from a yoga practice.
Probably before that, Matthew, remember that working at the foundation kind of gave me a different insight into having a brain injury. So I just want to touch upon that
Talk about that.
first.
Yeah.
So being at the foundation, working there, seeing our beneficiaries, I came to the realization that some of our beneficiaries are living with brain injuries, and cerebral palsy is a brain injury. And so I started to look at myself differently rather than seeing that I had a diagnosis and this diagnosis made me disabled. I wanted to know how I could show up in the world differently. So then I guess as an infant, you're given a life sentence, and as an adult, you're given the opportunity to go to rehab to see all of the things that you can go on and achieve after a brain injury. So that's what motivated me to start to try and live a little differently without this fear of not being good enough or being different, and start to try new things, and that's where yoga came in. Prior to trying yoga, my reaction, if someone had said, Paige, go and give yoga a go, I would have been like, seriously, I have cerebral palsy. But I wanted to change the narrative and do something different for me. And the mat gave me space away from competitive sport.
Yeah. So I just want to point out that was Paige with English grace saving my bacon to one of the main points I wanted to get across. So just so you know, that was like her gracefully saying, Matt, you forgot a whole big thread here. Matthew, you've got a big thread. So I'm really happy about that. And I want to dive into that a little bit more deeply. That I think that was one of the things that really struck me yesterday, is because I've worked with a lot of people with CP, and I think about the things that they're living with that I can see, the cognitive dimension of this. I knew, but I didn't fully get, but even more than that is the way that you have had to not be seen on a certain level, right? And not supported. And when you pointed out to me that, wait, it's just a traumatic brain injury just happened as a child, why do we not make rehabilitation not about, you know, here, learn these skills, but like figure out how rehabilitation can aid you in the life you're going to have in the same way we do it as an adult, right? Because it also led you just as practice yoga, you're also practicing neuro PT that works out that based on neuroplasticity, right? And so there's a whole bunch of things, and this is part of how she found the device to help her read in all these things. It's like taking a proactive role of using rehab how you want it as an adult, right? And that's a huge transformation, right? And that confidence just kind of happen. Is a confidence? I'm not sure what exactly that is, but it's a
I guess it's the realization that you are the expert of your own life. You know, when you're disabled or living with a condition, whether you were born with it or whether you acquired your injury, you listen to medical experts all the time. But what do you know about yourself? Like, and we have to be we have to be our own advocate. And I guess I wanted to be seen as me before CP, me before cerebral palsy, rather than CP before me, but also being able to live and seeing beyond CP.
Yeah. But like, so the attempt to say people first language, whatever, what you're talking about is so much deeper than that too, though. Right. And part of it is that because of the way you were imprinted as a child, and we're told and plugged into a world, is that the level of support at the level that we might call in this thing resilience, or the level that precedes the condition that we're living in, even if you're born with it or not, human being doesn't know how to support each other at that level. So it's not just this isn't just a problem with the medical model. This is a problem or an issue that we all need to get better at, is to learn how to be with the basic configuration of human being and the experience of being in a body and having a mind before the drama of a particular life gets going. So this is part of how yoga is one of many methodologies that tries to get at what's underneath, to support the whole story, right? There's a part of all of us that precedes the experience of whatever your life is and whatever your disability. You can call it whatever you want. Some people might call that a soul, some people might call it spirit. It's an experience, whatever it is, however we conceptualize it. So I do want to end with what I thought was one of those simple stories that seems simple, but is actually an indication of an incredible amount of healing realization. So one of the things that kind of threw you into that more of seclusion was finally an experience where someone stopped you on the road, you're willing to know what, and they said they stopped you, and a stranger said, what's wrong with your legs, right? And you came home and were really upset about it. And then you still get people, you wear AFOs, I'm guessing, when you walk around, and they ask you and they come and go, what's wrong with your legs? And so for a long time, your first reaction to that would be you'd explain what was wrong with you, right?
Yeah. Or explain that I've got cerebral palsy, or I'm living with cerebral palsy, I would do.
So that would be your first response, which is like, and then now I love this. What type of thing? So you take what used to be, and we've all done this, by the way, on the call. What happened? Older people ask me that, and I'm getting old now. So really old people come and go like, my God, what happened to you, right? And then you find yourself using too many words and they're not really listening. You talk about your CV, you start fumbling on words because you know they're not going to understand. And you get caught in this kind of vortex of unreality because what they're asking, they don't really want to listen to. Right? So
Yeah.
now what do you say?
Well, when you're Yeah, so I was at a physio clinic, and this very nice lady innocently said, that looks like a sad ankle. And I just replied, oh, this is a happy ankle. And just
Because the
again,
AFO is actually making it happy.
yeah, yeah,
So it's the little stories like that that the under part of the iceberg, like people on the call know that the difference between, no, it's not a sad ankle, that's a happy ankle because it's got the AFO and I know how to,
yeah,
that's one of those stories that people on the call know what it means. But a lot of people would just pass it by. Oh, that's sweet. No, that's like the whole universe of Paige's journey
yeah.
happening in a
I
simple
was,
toner, right?
yeah, I was so proud of my response. Because it's really stuck with me. And so for that person that took the time to tell me I had a sore ankle, I replied, I have a happy ankle. And that's pretty cool.
That's the whole point. All right, so I want to take a moment. Okay, we're going over. This is the time where if you need to drop up. I haven't taught any freaking yoga yet, and I'm gonna. Gosh, dang it. But if you have anyone has any comment or reaction or thing you want to ask Paige. And by the way, this is only the tip of the iceberg. In both these conversations that I had yesterday, there is a lot more that's sitting here that we'd all benefit from hearing more of. And what I think is this is true with almost everyone on the call. When you dig into the actual experiences of what we think are isolated lives, there's so much wisdom and there's so much that other people can learn from if we just are willing to share, but also have an audience and a listener that's willing to listen you into speech. So I hope that's part of what Mind Body Solutions does for each other. Laura, your hand's up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Paige because so much of your story was there was such a crossover because I also was born with a congenital condition and they gave me a lot of messages in school. For me, it wasn't reading. I was very good at that, but very poor at like mathematics and science because I have very poor spatial awareness and it happened. So I was what they call below average and would get my test scores were very poor in that area. But because I was above average, whatever that means, in other areas, I wasn't entitled to any additional help or whatever. So I struggled with that kind of nobody really understood that I was actually cognitively struggling with mathematics. And it got projected onto me that I just didn't try hard enough. And actually I was struggling with the fatigue. So my concentration wasn't very good for a longer time. Yeah, so I just related to a lot of that feeling of like, oh, am I just and I did the same thing that you did like around well, you were actually younger because younger than me, but like around 17, I just got very depressed and upset about it and anxious, and I got a lot of anxiety because um I was like, I don't think people understand that I'm struggling and I'm trying to pretend that I'm not. And unlike you, I have no athletic ability, so I can put it into that. But yeah, so I just and I kind of found a freedom in my wheelchair as well. I was like, well, this will be better. I'll keep up with everyone and it'll be faster and it'll be good. So yeah, so it was just like it was a recognition when I heard you say that, and I appreciate you sharing your story.
That's
Thank
why we
you.
do it.
There is a question in the chat.
Okay.
Um, they're wondering how the physio responded to your happy ankle story.
The physio wasn't there.
Oh,
I was paying for my treatment. And the physio wasn't there. But I could probably talk to you a bit about sort of my own change in, I guess, physio versus yoga, or seeing yoga as self-led physio, so having that choice. Physio was never a choice for me growing up. It was a need. It was something I had like 4 times a day growing up, and then as a teenager it just stopped because you're a teenager and you don't need physio anymore, but you still have CP. And then I guess yoga's taking that ownership of your own condition.
Right. We didn't even mention all that. She had 6 surgeries as a kid, and then 2 shoulder surgeries after the athletics impinged her nerve, and so all that extra medical intervention. And I would imagine that the physio would have said, "Oh, that's nice. That's a great story," and yet not known the full implications, like the audience here now knows, of what you just said, right? Like the transition from a sad foot to a happy foot, right? Ankle. It's like, there's a whole universe that's going underground that's transformed for that utterance. And so I want, all right, so we got to practice a little bit. And I told you I was going to have trouble, and I still went on too long in the beginning, right? But the great thing, let's practice for a little bit. This will get on recording. And for those of you who can stay, great. You should, because that's kind of the whole point, is that the great thing about what yoga does, and the way that yoga, quote, builds resilience isn't a skill. It's not a thing you do. It is, you maybe demonstrate resilience when you deal with your life better and in different ways, but that's just the demonstration of it. The energy that leads to resilient actions and resilient responses is more fundamental than that. And one of the things that I think is so important about there being a mind-body approach to resilience, it's way deeper than just having a good attitude, being able to see the glass half full, right? As opposed to half empty, all those like platitudes that have good meaning, but they need to hit the pavement into the world at a different level. What I love about what asana does, and the way it, I think that Melinda said it really well about, all of a sudden you're more than the sum of your parts. There's a wholeness here, and it's actually a sensation. Like yoga, when it's done well and done from inside to out, is an infusion of remembering and revealing that what seems like loss and seems like challenge to overcome, actually itself is not something to overcome. It's something to realize the life force within it, right? It's not an opportunity. It's not just for you to grow. It's like, no, its fundamental nature is also alive, right? And what I love about asana, and I really believe that asana is an essential limb of yoga, because it allows this realization of, we have not great words for it, of wholeness. It allows for the realization to be experienced, right? As opposed to be dependent on a belief or an attitude or a mental orientation to your experience. So sit up straight and tall. So that the centering part, I always say that you're opening doors when you're centering, right? You're opening doors to aspects of your experience, not just aspects of self. We didn't get as much into the levels of self-realization that Paige gets out of her yoga practice, right? But you're accessing a different energy source when you quiet down. This energy source is not ultimately disturbed by movement and action, right? So this is why I like practicing asana, and I'm not just a meditator, because I want to explore how this energy, this deep-rooted energy, comes into the world and transforms the world. So feel your feet on the floor and your sitting bones. And I believe there's certain parts of the spine that actually are really important in this realization of the vibrancy of what is the mind perceives as loss, because it's beyond the range of the mind to directly intuit. That's what the yogis are trying to tell you to calm your mind down for. So there are different parts of the spine that we need to come online. So the base of the spine, the midline of every pose, right? Remember, I say things like you need to realize prana rewards structure. So, and then it starts to fill in. And the thing I wrote in my book is that, like, think about prana, it is like digging a well into the earth. It's like the earth will fill it in with water eventually, right? So you create the structure, the whole, so the earth will fill it in. Well, prana will fill it in the way the earth gives, right? So feel your sitting bones and allow that there's a space between your sitting bones. And then separate, again, the being able to separate trauma, loss, disability, being able to separate parts of your body, right? Hit down with the sitting bones and do a very gentle lift in your lower, very low abdomen. So you're going down and the rise. By the way, that was already happening on an existential level, that the rise and the fall was actually happening. But when you pick a point and go down at the life chakra and then lift up, it kind of makes you want to inhale, right? So like it's going to want you, you're going to want to imbibe from the world when you actually start to realize in one point the down and the up. But when you hit down with your sitting bones and you lift your chest, there's an opportunity to feel awareness back down through your inner heels, right? So you're actually, and you know, I've been talking a lot about that first step into action. So stop all the yoga for a second, the asana. Let it go to dissipation again and watch the process of creating the structure and then the action, and try to make the action not be gripped. And realize that your life chakra, more at the base of the spine, where procreation happens and elimination happens, both, right, actually feeds the lift and the connection in the chest with the space around you. Right? So you're going down and up. And now you're starting to go across. So separate the space between your sitting bones. Separate the space between your shoulder blades. Balance your head over your neck. Open to what's in front of you. Open to what's behind you. Think about Melinda's walking stick supporting where the spine is in space. You're doing the same thing. You're creating walking sticks, your body, for the core energy that precedes, that comes through your spine before it comes through your brain, before it comes through your mind. Your mind's last. I always say it's last to the party. Correct. Feel the gentle nudging of the inhalation into the fingers of the spine, the rib cage. Hit down, hit up. Feel the expansion of the breath. Keep the gift of the expansion even as you exhale. To do this, exhale more from the back ribs. Feel the extension in your spine. So the breath starts to go in service of the rising and the falling. All this is at the core of your resilience. It's just waiting for you to access the potential. So one of the mistakes I make in my yoga practice is that I get so serious about this realization, and I forget that the realization itself is not a sad ankle, it's a happy ankle. It's not a sad foot, it's a happy foot. Right? So that's why in the beginning of the classes, when I teach, I start having us move around. Right? Because I want to remember that I can start rocking with this energy, that rhythm's accessible here, even if I can barely move, right? That there's a lightness here that pervades my body. So move around however, start moving your limbs, right? Because remember, this energy in your midline actually is seeking expression through your limbs, right? And it even seeks expression whether or not the limbs are there. And you know that I think that space in your spine and low back, especially if you sit a lot, is one of the magic elixirs of well-being. So move around a little bit and use rhythm, use your tools and gravity changes to remind you that this is a living realization, that the way your mind accesses it has to go, the mind has to go into the ceasing in order to know that this is here, because the mind thinks it's in charge, right? But the ceasing actually has a living force in it, right? And that's wild, right? And so I'm gonna go back over my chair. And so I'm doing all these things because I'm opening up this level of emptiness in space and making sure it's in my body, right? Because this is the energy that helps the struggling mind, right? By the way, your mind struggles with the complexity of your life. You know, one of the really powerful things about your body is your body keeps it simple, stupid. It does what it's supposed to do, and your body's not exactly worried about tomorrow, right? It's just happening. Right? So take your legs wide. Again, this is what I do in the beginning of every class, right? But we're actually opening the sense and the wholeness of resilience and remembering that this sensation actually goes through your whole body, right? So, and if if you want to do more challenging poses, I'm taking my legs wide, but I'm making sure my spine is leading here, right? So this is like just the basic warm-up I do almost in every class I teach on Mondays, right? Because I'm trying to remember that the realization is spacious, even though my mind needs to collapse it and make it more empty in order for the mind makes this energy serious. At least mine does, right? And so I don't need it just to be serious, right? I need it to be hopeful, right? So all these, we're so lucky, and I'm lifting up again. We were so lucky that we've got people that came before us that figured out ways to move the body that are connected to the sensation of wholeness that's at the core of our being, right? We're lucky. I'm so glad I didn't have to figure this all out by myself. I'm going to put one elbow forward on the table. I'm going to start to make it be a little bit more precise. I'm going to hit down at the elbow, length of the other side of the bicep, lift my chest right away because I got one arm forward. I know I've got to balance it and hit down through my right arm's on the table. Right, my left sitting bone needs to go down so I can lift my chest, so I can get a sense of my own midline so the spinal energy can come through me. I'm going to exhale from the back ribs. And as I do that and extend my spine, I'm going to go down through my feet. What? Yeah. I'm not just doing a pose. I'm not just doing a pose. I'm integrating wholeness and letting my body show me, my mind, that it's all over my whole body. And it was already through your whole body. All right, so I'm down again. I'm lengthening the inner side of my tricep. I'm hitting down. I'm lifting my chest. I'm hitting my sits bones down. I'm hitting down. I'm a little bit asymmetrical because I'm twisted. I'm breathing. I'm remembering that the universe supports my asana. So I'm going to let a gentle hand come in and support the back of my sternum. It's going to make me smile because it's a reminder that I'm not alone. I'm going to do it again. Got both elbows forward. Now I'm doing weird stuff. I'm letting the empty space between the skin of my palms help me feel the center of my chest. Then I'm going to take this empty space here that my mind never gets to directly access, and I'm going to broaden across my sacrum with it. And I'm going to lift my chest. And I'm going to balance my head over my neck. I'm not going inward to make there be less. I'm going inward to make there be more. There's a way more here. What about, I was focusing on this side of the hand, but are you touching the back of your hand to the air too? Right? You go inward to make more. You go inward to find your strength and resilience. So there's more of you. Good, and then release. One of the unfortunate things about a Western conception is that we hunker down and narrow in order to exercise our will, right? To overcome things, right? But I don't think that's what's meant by the limb of concentration, right? I think the concentration is a complete concentration, right? So I'm practicing movement, right? I'm staying centered. So when I take my arm wide and I'm going to move through like a current that is me and outside me and go across and move my hand on and my arm on the outside of my torso and right through my torso. And then I'm going to do it on the other side. I'm going to bring it up, pull in more space, more freedom, right? Have my hand move across my midline, feel both feet, and have this travel right through me. And then I'm going to take that awareness and lift my chest. I'm not going to crank the twist. I'm practicing my wholeness. So it's not just that you're being more mindful of your movement, right? You're trying to get your mind not to impede your wholeness, right? Because all this is connected. I'm taking the universe when you take your arm wide, take it up. Even if you can't take your arm, take it up. Take up more space. Move like you're putting your hand through your own river, right? And then open, and you get to open it and fire it some. So you're not exercising your body in an asana. You're moving your empty space through your body, right? Which is different because there's a reason, and then come back to center. There's a reason why Shavasana is so quiet, because nourishment comes into the empty spaces through the ceasing. So I'm doing dog pose now. So for my mind to not shut off my own receiving, I have to quiet it down, right? Because the mind's going to think, you think asana, all the instructions is about making you more precise. No, you're using the precision to help you receive. So if you get caught up in the actions too strongly, you're going to cut off the prana. Remember, I'm trying to get, so my hands are on the table, my feet, maybe yours are on the floor, mine are on the foot pedals, my sitting bones are on the floor. My hands and my feet are actually singing the same song. My spine needs to connect my hands and my feet and my sitting bones. I'm all of a sudden hearing the silent Om. because something's going through all of it. That's the source of resilience. It's a good time to breathe. Good, and then release. So in the way I'm trying to share the asana now, you're getting the conditions all set up, and then you use the breath, right? Because the breath is going to have a filling, a ceasing, an emptying, and a ceasing. So it's going to have the whole gambit of existence to empower all of you, right? It's not just about oxygen. My goodness, it's not just about oxygen. So now I'm going to come forward. I'm going to now activate. Can I like take this sense of wholeness? So I'm trying to move around quick so I can like feel all of me, because I'm about to get focused and more willful in upward facing dog, right? So, but I want all of me, not just go to where I want to go. I want to get to the pose. I want all of me to come into the pose. I want the gravity shift, the movement of my spines, the shifting of my sitting bones, to recruit all of me into a version of serious will. So I'm going to open a little bit this way, and then I'm going to come forward slowly and take my forearms under my legs, on my femur bones, and shift gravity, receive and drink up all the things that came with the shift in gravity. I'm going to ground my shoulder blades down, ground my sitting bones, feel my feet on the floor. And then in this structure, I'm going to activate my spine directly and lift my spine through the center of my chest up towards the sky. Shoulder blades down, shoulder blades apart, center of the chest up. Don't lose your sitting bones. Don't lose your feet. Your will needs not to disturb the beauty. Good, and then release. Good luck with that. I'll be doing that the rest of my life. I'm letting out of the pose now because my will disturbs stuff. Wow, with enough practice, maybe it won't. You're not more strong because you flex your muscles. You're more strong if what's feeding your action recruits all of you. So I'm going to start again with more space. Forward through. Ground. Thank God for the earth. My forearms go down, my feet touch the earth. I start to channel upward. I'm not moving yet, but I know there's an upward channel coming. But I want to broaden across my sacrum, broaden the space between my shoulder blades, start to become a better receiver of what's here, right? Hit down and then start to move my spine up, but keep the horizontal extension between the shoulder blades, the broadening across the sacrum, the down to the ground. And here comes your will. Can you not disturb the pond as you bring things to action? Good, and then release. You know, there's the physical strength that you gain in a yoga pose for sure by doing yoga. But the strength that you really want is systemic strength. You want to get it. So hopefully, even that pose, when you recruit all of you, is kind of like tiring, right? Right? There's an action going on here and it's really deep. So I'm moving again so I don't get too serious with it, because I can get lost in the seriousness of it, right? That's one of my weaknesses as a yogi. I'm so awed by what's going on, right? That I forget to be light with it. So I keep pointing that out as my mistake because I don't want you to make the same one. You know, don't make my mistakes, right? And then I'm going to come back to center. all of you, your complete self, is not a thought, and it's not accessible fully to your mind. So learn to sit and receive all of you as you center. Use your breath if you want. Don't hold your breath. All of you, knowable and unknowable, make up your resilience. Tangible, intangible, these are just words that we try to like point to. There are dimensions of you that you will never know. That's cool. There are dimensions of your potential that you'll never know. That's cool. Do you know that you're stronger than you'll ever know? That's a hard thing for your mind to know. So don't try to know it with your mind. Just let it be true. Our lives, when you live with trauma, loss, disability, measure us at every turn. Don't meet it as an adversary. Your strength's already here. Your mind just doesn't know. Soften the jaw, the inside of your mouth. Let the brain recede from the inside of the skull. Gently lift the center of your chest. Hope. Always accessible through the spine. It's beautiful here. You're complete. That's the truth. Don't believe it. Let it be true. Start to bring yourself back. Slightly deeper inhalation. Slightly longer exhalation. I have strength that I'll never know, but I get to have. I hope you allow the same. one of the lines, when you're ready to open your eyes, close them if you have to, come slow. One of the things that I wish I could pass on, that I'm still learning myself, is that life is not a proof. It's a privilege. Right? You don't really have to prove anything. Just honor it. All right. Well, I went only a half hour long, but when the stories are good, the greatest resource and capital that Mind Body Solutions has is your story and your wisdom. All of you.